Welcome to the START podcast, Somatic Tools for Alignment, Regulation, and Transformation. I'm your host, Jessa Hooley. This episode is recorded as part of START, a free somatic healing program for people with painful childhoods. Join START to get access to this podcast along with exclusive monthly on-demand classes led by me, a somatic trauma specialist. If you're ready to create a life of calm, confidence, and belonging, join START by visiting alwaysvibin.com or search Vibin Wellness in your Apple or Google Play App Store. That's always VIBIN.com. Hello. Welcome back to this podcast / article, depending on whether you're reading this, watching this, listening to this. My name is Jessa Hooley. I am a somatic trauma specialist, and I'm so happy that you're here. I say welcome back, but really this is my first time recording a podcast for Vibin. And I couldn't be more excited to bring these somatic tools for alignment, regulation, and transformation into this more accessible medium for people. Today, I'm going to be introducing the newest theme for the START program. Coming in on a new year, a new month, new year. It's 2025, if you can believe it. And I really wanted to take off this year with a really impactful theme. And the theme for this month is for those who never feel settled. The word we're going to be zeroing in on this month is hypervigilance. You might have heard this word before. If you haven't, the essence of hypervigilance is, I never feel settled. Now, everybody that's listening to this has had times in their life where they can relate. Phases in their life when they're going through something particularly challenging or different, where they just can't feel settled. But when we're talking about the experience of those who are struggling to recover and make sense of a world coming after a painful childhood, a traumatic childhood, this experience can be ever present. This is where it moves from, in this moment, I'm not feeling settled, to I never feel settled. And this can be experienced in many different ways, which is kind of what we're going to be chatting about today. So today's episode is I never feel settled, just like what I'm saying here, Hypervigilance Explained. So let's get right into it. What is hypervigilance? In today's world of so much therapy speak, you might have heard this word before, and you might have your own interpretation of it. The definition I'm going to offer is hypervigilance is a state of heightened alertness where an individual is extremely sensitive to their surroundings, often anticipating danger that's not present. So there are a few words in there that really stand out to me. The first one is heightened alertness, a state of heightened alertness. This isn't just I'm aware, this is amplified. You can imagine the speakers kind of been dialed up a little bit to, do you know what comes to mind? ASMR. You're hearing all the little things in your surroundings or your experience. Extremely sensitive. Once again, as we talk about ASMR as like an example, if you're working with hypervigilance, if you're experiencing hypervigilance, this isn't just an appropriate amount, and I use that word very loosely, and you'll see why later on. An appropriate amount of sensitivity to the situation. This is extreme sensitivity. And then finally, the last piece there is just the keystone of this experience, often anticipating danger that is not present. And that is going to show up many times throughout the episode today. So this relates to painful childhoods, traumatic childhoods, abusive childhoods, in so many ways. Really, this is a universal experience of people, and I can say that fairly confidently, at least from my own experience with people that have painful childhoods. In some degree, when you've been raised in an environment where safety is not guaranteed, hypervigilance will result. And there are very important reasons for that. It's an appropriate thing to develop. It is a helpful thing to develop if you were developing in an environment that wasn't safe. Some of the examples of environments that might cultivate hypervigilance as a recurring behavior. First, emotionally hot and cold relationships with parents. These are the parents or caregivers where the kids don't really know how today's gonna go. Sometimes there are good days, some days are really, really shitty with this parent. And even me just bringing that up might bring up some things in you as you reflect on your own childhood. These are the parents where the whole day, how the whole day went, really depended on how this person woke up. Did they wake up on the right or the wrong side of the bed? That's gonna determine how this entire household goes today, or this week, or this month, or this year. And oftentimes these really volatile parents, emotionally volatile parents, can show up in the extremes. Where they're really great, there are some really great times with these parents, and there are some really scary times with these parents. Another childhood experience that can lead to hypervigilance is physical abuse, where there's physical harm that is threatened upon the kids. Inconsistent care. This is one I really want to highlight because a lot of adults that I work with, they say, yeah, well, my parent didn't hit me, or I always, I didn't have to worry about these typical quote unquote abusive experiences in my childhood. I don't really have a reason to reflect on my childhood. But inconsistent care, whether this goes all the way to neglect or on the other side of the spectrum, as a child, not knowing if you will be cared for on a regular basis can 100% develop into a hypervigilant personality. And all these things really come together to illustrate that it's not just consistent threat as a kid that develops into hypervigilance, which of course it can, but also inconsistent threat. This includes the children, the people who are now adults. This includes those who sometimes had what they needed and sometimes didn't. These are the people who had inconsistent but recurring threat. Inconsistent but recurring threat. So they knew that threat was possible on an ongoing basis. Whether they experienced threat on an ongoing basis isn't as relevant as their embodied experience of today could be a day that's dangerous. I've had enough dangerous days or experiences to know that today could be one of them. It's kind of a negative flip side of the gambling game. If you're going in to gamble and you pull that lever, this could be the big one. This could be a good one, right? And on the other hand, for people that have inconsistent but recurring threat cycles in their childhood, this is, I'm pulling the lever. Is this going to be a bad one? So this shows up for people in adulthood as a symptom under a variety of diagnoses, particularly those who have either self-identified or professionally been diagnosed with things like CPTSD. Hypervigilance is really one of those universal symptoms / experiences for people to just feel like they're never quite at ease. So what does this even look like in real life? So far, we're kind of talking theoretical, really high level. How does this show up in my life? It's probably what you're asking. I like to categorize hypervigilance in 3 different ways. The first one is jumpy hypervigilance. The second one is what I like to call, quote, "Are you mad at me?" hypervigilance. And the third one is embodied hypervigilance. So jumpy hypervigilance. These are people who jump easily. They've got a really sharp startle reflex, quick movements, shock them really easily. And they're highly responsive to these things. So someone shifts really quick. Let's say someone like drops a cup or something like that. They drop a cup, this person reaches for it really quick, and the hypervigilant person jumps out of their chair. Oh my God, what happened? They're out of breath. They might scream really easily. Their heart pounds really easily. So like I said, that out of breath experience. These are people where you startle them, and maybe you startle someone else, and I say you to them, but this is likely you. You might understand what I'm saying as the person who has this done to them. Someone startles the hypervigilant person, and it becomes, quote, a thing. They either scream, and it's like this big, shocking to-do, or maybe they become really upset. Why did you do that? That wasn't funny. That scared the shit out of me. Don't talk to me the rest of the night. And this other person that doesn't understand the hypervigilant response is looking at them like, where's your funny bone? Like, come on, I'm just teasing you. I'm just teasing you. What's the big deal? I do this to other people. They don't get mad at me. Why are you so mad at me? And this can really show up as shame in the hypervigilant person. And that shame, because the shame comes from, yeah, no one else is freaking out, but I am. And whether we're close enough to ourselves to feel that inside of us or not, it will manifest in different ways. It can turn into masking. Oh, you're right, I'm sorry, yeah, that's not a big deal. False laughter, appeasement, that's like the people pleasing. Yeah, ha, 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 it's not a big deal, even though inside you're feeling really uncomfortable. It can turn into rage. What the hell do you mean it's not a big deal? Don't you see that was a big deal? Don't talk to me. I don't want to be around you. I can't even be around you right now. See how both of those are, there's something wrong with me. I need to get away from this feeling. Either appease you, fawn, I'm sorry, or just get away from me because you being by me is making me feel like there's something wrong with me. And let's bring this back to that definition. It's because in this experience, it's not about the person being startled. When that person was startled, the reaction that they're having was not to that moment. When the person was startled, the reaction they're having was not actually about that moment. It's an embodied response from something that happened a long time ago. And in the definition, it says, often anticipating danger that's not present. That's what that means. The hypervigilant person, was not in any actual danger when their friend or their partner jumped up behind them. And yet, the embodied experience, the actual experience for them, was that they were in incredible danger. The second kind of hypervigilance, and once again, these are just my things. If you Google these, they're probably not going to show up anywhere under these definitions. These are what resonate for me. So the second one that I like to consider is what I call, are you mad at me hypervigilance? You could also call this relational hypervigilance. This happens between people in building our relationships. And I say, are you mad at me? It could also be, are you okay? This is when you're constantly looking for cues to determine if the other person is upset. That's where all the time, are you mad at me? Are you mad at me? Are you upset with me? Or, are you okay? What's the matter? What's the matter? Can I help? Can I help? Can I help? And this can be, I want to highlight that this can be a necessary behavior if you are currently existing within a really contentious or abusive relationship, where hypervigilance is what's actually keeping you safe, right? That's where this developed from. This developed from a childhood where I need to be constantly checking in with my caregiver to make sure that I'm safe, right? So if we're in relationships now, whether they're partnerships or friendships or any other kind of relationships, even work relationships, where you have a lot of contention and a lot of abuse, or even just boundary breaking, where there's just this feeling of danger, hypervigilance is developed as a necessary behavior so that you can get ahead of whatever's happening, right? But the problem is when, once again, going back to that definition, often anticipating danger that's not present. What if we're in a healthy relationship with someone? What if this is a friend that we can really count on? What if this is a partner that shows up for us? You know, we're not talking about perfect people, but these aren't toxic people. These are relationships that benefit us, right? And we want to lean into these relationships. But instead, there's always this little space between where what's going on inside of us is always wondering, is this person safe? I need to check in. Are you mad at me? Is there something I did wrong? Are you okay? Which is another way of saying, am I in danger with you? Are you safe? And when we're kids, this is developed, like I said, from our caregivers. If you live with a caregiver who controls all of your basic needs, and depending on whether they're upset or not, determines whether you get your needs met, hypervigilance is incredibly important. You needed to learn as a child to navigate this person's emotions so that you could calculate how best to get your needs met or avoid danger, depending on what's happening. And in the next episode, we're going to be going really deeply into this particular topic. But for today, that's really a good high-level walkthrough of this Are You Mad at Me hypervigilance. And the last one is the one that I think all of us can really identify with, whether we realize it or not. And this is embodied hypervigilance. This is really this is the core of hypervigilance. And this is subconscious. The other two, you can kind of think in real time, oh, I'm overreacting to this situation. This is an example of me being hypervigilant, whether that's someone jumped at me and I freaked out, or I keep asking my partner whether they're okay. You know, these are things that we can intellectually look at and say, okay, I have a little bit of choice over this behavior right now, to some extent. Embodied hypervigilance exists beneath the subconscious. It's held within our nervous system and our body tissues. And I'm going to explain what that means. Our nervous system is the part of us that is always working. It is always helping us figure out, am I safe, am I not safe? It does a lot of things. Too much to cover in this episode. But one of the big things it's kind of the boss over what happens when I don't feel safe. And it interacts with our body tissues and tells our body what to do when we're in danger. So if you built this, let's use the analogy of this is like your security team. You can think of your nervous system as like a group of people who their only job is to keep you safe, right? And when you were training them on the job, you first hired them, you brought them into your home or your company, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna give you the ropes of like what life's like here. And then once I've kind of laid the ground field for you, then you'll know how to do your job, right? So you show them around. This is your nervous system when you were a kid. You're like, yep, it is always dangerous here. You guys have to be on watch all the time. There's always something scary happening, and it requires the greatest amount of force for you to keep me safe. High alert constantly. I'm going to be a very high demand client because I am always in danger. You can imagine how the security force is learning to take care of you. Now they're like, okay, I see. This isn't like some small job. This isn't someone that we kind of have to be loose about. This is someone who's always at risk, and we need to be on our A game constantly. Otherwise, they're going to get hurt. That's our job. That's what we're here to do. So you can imagine, now you're like, okay, go do your thing. You grow up, now you're a grown up. And for the sake of this analogy, we're going to say that you're in environments that are safer than you were when you were a child. I want to acknowledge that that's not always the case for people. But for the sake of this analogy, you've grown up, there's relative safety. But this A-team is out there. They're ready. They're looking for any drop of info, any little tick that shows that there's a threat that needs to be handled, and they're going to go handle it. What this feels like in your body, in your nervous system, in a very simplified way, is tension. This turns into chronically bracing. Maybe you are a really stiff person. You don't feel like you're very flexible. Maybe getting massages is not your thing because it just hurts. You feel like they're massaging a brick wall. That can be an experience of chronic tension. It can also show up as chronic pain. When tension shows up, the fluids, all the things that keep us balanced, can't really move through our tissues, which causes a lot of inflammation. Now we're in pain all the time, right? Another experience of this embodied hypervigilance is digestive problems. Certain hormones are released that slow down our digestion. The bracing slows down our digestion. When our bodies feel like there's always something to either run away from or to fight, digestion slows down. And so maybe you experience chronic stomach aches or problems going to the bathroom. Tics, repetitive behaviors, these can be embodied hypervigilance. Things like always bouncing your knee, always playing with your fingers, cracking your knuckles. You always need to fidget. These can be embodied hypervigilance. You can think of that as, think of like a boxer getting ready in the ring. Okay? I always got to be ready. I'm getting ready for a fight all the time. So when we're here, we have these really embodied hypervigilant responses. It's because the nervous system was built on programming based on the reality that there is always a threat of danger, and I need to be ready before it hurts me. So not only is there a threat of danger, but I've been here enough times to know how bad it's going to hurt. So if I can get ahead of it, then maybe it won't hurt so bad. I need to be ready before it hurts me. It's not able to put the guard down. It's preparatory. Even saying that, you might feel that in you. I'm preparing for something. And when we talk about this, throughout the month, we're going to be going over like what this costs you in your day-to-day life, techniques for working with it, really important info on what to do with the experience of hypervigilance. But it's important to know that whenever I'm talking about these behaviors, patterns, coping mechanisms, however you want to categorize hypervigilance and things like it, whenever I'm talking about them, I like to work from a framework where there is no shame. Because oftentimes we hear these things. We say, oh shit, yeah, I'm definitely hypervigilant. I need to stop being that. And oh my God, how nice would that be if it was that simple to just be like, yeah, I'm just not going to be hypervigilant anymore. But that's really not possible. Not with that attitude. The only way that we can change the patterns of hypervigilance isn't by saying, hey, I don't like you, stop. It's actually by seeking more understanding for what it's doing for us. What needs are being met when we are being hypervigilant? So the first thing is something that we nailed on repeatedly, which is this was necessary at one point in your life. If we're operating on the wisdom that our bodies do what they have to, and they evolve in ways that are the most helpful, then we can safely make the assumption that if you're being hypervigilant, if you experience hypervigilance, it's there for a reason and you needed it at some point. So growing up, hypervigilance probably served you in a few different ways. First, it actually kept you safer. Maybe you were able to dodge certain bullets from your caregiver because you saw them coming. You could get out of the room before you were a target. You could avoid asking for the thing that would have incurred more wrath or could have ended in rejection because you could anticipate that that need wouldn't be able to be met. Another need that hypervigilance gave you at that time was a sense of control. We all need, as people, to feel an embodied sense of control. And you really can swap out the word control for safety. I'm in a place where I know certain things. And the baseline being that I'm not going to get hurt here. That's why control and safety, when we're talking about this in an embodied way, can be fairly synonymous. You can think of it as like a reed in the ocean, you know, those plants that have the roots in the ocean and they're grounded there. And then the water can move them. They flow through the water side to side, all through them. They can have that freedom to explore, to be flexible, to reach out, to just move with ease because they're grounded. And that sense of safety or control is what gives us the flexibility to be free. So hypervigilance is a way of trying to find a sense of safety. Well, if I can determine what's going to happen, then maybe I can know when I'm safe, which is really, really important. So going forward, we'll really be talking about how to build up an embodied sense of safety. Like I said, next week we're going to go a little bit deeper into that relational hypervigilance. And then the remainder of the month, we're really going to tackle how we can build an embodied sense of safety. And that is the need that's being met by hypervigilance, which means that the behaviors of hypervigilance can slowly start to shed. If we have the safety embodied in us, there's no need to try and get ahead of that with hypervigilance to predict the future. So now you know, why don't I ever feel settled? I hope that gave you a good basic overview of hypervigilance and maybe some of the complexity about how it can show up in your own life. Maybe it's brought up some questions about your own history and your own behaviors, but most importantly, I hope it showed you a path to compassion for these kinds of behaviors that might be showing up in your life. Remember, this month is all for those who never feel settled. Make sure you join me next week where we'll be going over that "Why are you always mad at me?" relational hypervigilance. Thanks for listening. To get the most from this podcast episode, visit alwaysvibin.com to join the free START program, or search Vibin Wellness in your Apple or Google Play App Store. The information in this episode is not intended to diagnose or treat any condition. Please contact your mental health practitioner or a medical doctor for advice specific to your needs.